Hello and welcome to episode 320 of the Clean Energy Show. Coming to you from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham.
This week, the trend is clear. Electric vehicle adoption has skyrocketed since we started our podcast in 2020. Coincidence?
Yes, I believe it is a coincidence.
I guess so. The UK has a new EV road tax based on how much you drive. The only way to escape the tax will be to reenact that scene from Ferris Bueller's Day Off where you jack the car up and run it in reverse to back up the odometer. Foolproof then and foolproof now.
I can't wait to see the look on the bastard's face.
Oh no! All that and more of this bi-coastal edition, I'm not on the coast, of the Clean Energy Show. I wish I was on the coast.
All right. It's lovely here on the coast. The weather is fabulous here in Victoria in Canada.
And you said it's perfect every time you go. I'm not buying that. It can't always be perfect in Victoria. I know it rains there. I know there's clouds. It's just the clouds part for Brian Stockton.
I have a representative sample size of a couple handfuls of days, and the weather is always perfect. I can report.
All right.
But yeah, I want to talk about where I am right now. I'm at the Inn at Laurel Point in Victoria, and I booked it because it's a cool hotel that's on the harbor, and it was designed by Arthur Erickson, who is this renowned Canadian architect. And so that in itself is, interesting and worthwhile. But I didn't realize till I checked in and I looked at their website, they really endeavor to be an eco-friendly hotel. So this is an excellent clean energy show type hotel. So I'm in the Erickson wing. He designed this wing. The other half was built much earlier. It opened in 1989 and it has a marine cooling system and it pumps ocean water, which is right behind me. And they have 114 heat pumps throughout the property. And, this is to control the temperature. It's quite lovely.
How many rooms would you say is in the hotel? Is it a fairly big hotel?
Well, both wings are fairly big, but, it's sort of mid-sized hotel. I wouldn't say it's huge. And I'm not sure that the older wing is cooled in the same way. But this half is fabulous. And further on the website, it says in 2021, Global Optimism welcomed the Inn at Laurel Point as the first ever hotel in North America to join the Climate Pledge, an initiative co-founded by Amazon and Global Optimism. It's a commitment to meet the Paris Agreement a decade early, and the initiative has garnered hundreds of signatories across 16 countries, including many big global brands that we've heard of, but also Harbour Air, which we've talked about before. This is the airplane company that does short trips between Vancouver Island and and Vancouver here on the West Coast. And they've been trying for years to electrify their airplanes, and they have, working prototypes. As far as I know, they are still not in service. I can hear them taking off and landing, and they sound quite loud. So they haven't managed to make it work yet. I think mostly in terms of regulations. But yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think it's certification for taking paid passengers on an airplane takes a lot of certification, and that is a really prolonged process. Although, you're changing the engine in it. I mean, I was watching a video on YouTube about an electric boat that they have a normal boat and, with a gas engine, but it's just a different engine. So, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
It's not like the airframe's different or anything like that, or the controls are different. It's just the power.
And it's the perfect kind of plane to electrify because it's a short hop. Even I flew Air Canada, and the flight from Vancouver to Victoria is 11 minutes in the air.
Really?
Yeah.
That seems like a horrible waste.
It is.
Why didn't you fly directly to Victoria?
You can't. There's no direct flights from Regina to
there used to be 2 years ago. I was looking at them. Yeah, we were thinking about going to visit my son by plane. And in fact, it was cheaper. In fact, we thought, why not go to Victoria, save the money on the ferry, which is, a flight in itself. Like it's a lot to go by car. But we'd already be in Victoria. We'd look around for a while, and then we would take the ferry back to Vancouver and fly from Vancouver back to home. And I'm surprised, maybe it's the high fuel prices because they're cutting back a lot of flights. Or maybe it was West. Maybe you don't fly WestJet. It was WestJet that I was looking at, by the way.
Yeah, I thought I checked WestJet, but no, I flew Air Canada, and there's definitely no direct flights for them. So, the hotel is aiming to be carbon neutral. They are also biosphere certified, whatever that means.
I don't know, but we should look it up. Seems like we should look it up.
Aside from that, it is a lovely hotel with a lovely view. One of the nicest hotels I've ever stayed in, quite frankly.
You've stayed in some nice hotels. You pick and choose very carefully. So that's an endorsement for the Laurel Point.
Laurel Point.
The Inn at Laurel Point.
Not sponsored.
It should be. And they should keep ND filter for the windows in the hotel for you when you arrive so that we can do video podcasts. And
it is a lovely view, but I've got some ND up here that looks great on the video, I think.
What happens is the light from the windows is too bright for when you're shooting a person inside, and the film industry and television industry put something called ND, neutral density filter, over the window. And Brian is dedicated to this podcast and packed some with him so that he could do this podcast in addition to his podcast, Mike, so that the window would not be overexposed for the backdrop.
And also, I have two lamps that you can't quite see, the two table lamps from the living room here in the room that I've moved close to me to get a little bit of a fill light. It's not great, but I got a little bit of light from these lamps.
Yeah, if you want to see it, it'll be on our Patreon page for everyone to look at for free.
Yeah. All right, I got an email from my brother. He brought up a couple of things that I thought were interesting that we should talk about. We were talking about invasive species not long ago, where because of climate change, in Greece, they're battling these fish, these puffer fish that are invading their waters that never used to be there because the ocean is warming. We have a problem here on the prairies. There's these certain tree-eating beetles that have now expanded their territory farther north as it warms. Anyway, my brother told me about the emerald ash borer that is in his neck of the woods, and he has an acreage in Ontario in Canada.
And so he has woods near him, right? Because I know you're talking about...
I mean, he has tons of trees on his property. He has woods on his property. He's got several acres there. And I looked it up. It's not a climate problem. It just came apparently from like shipping crates coming from China. This is a bug from China that stowed away on shipping crates and, shipping pallets and ended up here in North America and has been slowly expanding. And so my brother says when he bought his property a few years ago, he knew that they existed, they were in the area, but they weren't on his property at all. Now they are, and he says practically overnight, almost all of our ash tree have died. We have hundreds of dead ash trees. It's very sad.
And let me guess, there's not a damn thing anyone can do about it, right?
I don't think so. I mean, that's maybe going to be a fire hazard for him in the future. He's maybe going to have to do something with all those dead trees. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's super, super unfortunate.
Yeah, all because of our global economy, which is making, viruses that humans get and pandemics and everything we're all on one big island really nowadays.
Yeah. And it's, it's always been a problem in the past when, you create something like, a canal between two riverways, you end up, introducing different species from different places. So it's one of those inevitable things, and they're trying to fight it. The city of Thunder Bay in Ontario is having a terrible problem. A lot of their trees are going down in the city of Thunder Bay. But, and anyway, one more thing my brother mentioned, he listens to the Humble and Fred podcast. Those are two radio broadcasters in Canada who now have a podcast. And Humble Howard, one of the hosts, he owns a Tesla, and it was in a parking lot. It got hit by somebody, it was an accident. And so he's got an insurance claim, and his insurance covers a replacement car. Often you'll have that with your car insurance coverage where, while the car is getting repaired, they give you a loaner. Anyway, they give him a gas-powered loaner. He's like, well, wait a minute, I'm going to have to pay for all that gasoline while I have this gas-powered car? That's ridiculous. And apparently he fought with the insurance company back and forth, and eventually they agreed to cover his gasoline. I thought that was super interesting. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
If anyone else is having that,
we have a car claim going in for hail, and
Yeah.
we're going to get, we have that extra insurance for having a loaner car. My wife does because she uses it for work. She's,
Well, there
insured
you
to
go.
the teeth on that thing. But I'm going to have to fight for that. I know
Yeah.
we're going to have to, because we're not going to want to pay for gas and put gasoline in our
Nope.
car and spill it on our clothes and hail that crap.
And you can explain to them that you also have solar panels. So, your electricity bill is lower than most people. There's some people who would be paying literally zero to power their electric cars, and then having to suddenly pay gas at today's prices would be
It's an outrage.
absolutely horrendous. So the precedent has been set. Now you can look forward to fighting with your insurance company about getting them to pay for the gas.
Well, it's been a month since my operation and I'm still not doing great. So we have a shorter show, at least not from my end. It's from your end,
Yeah.
and your end is
I
in
got lots.
Victoria. So yeah, it'll be your show, the Brian Stockton show this week, and there's no lightning round, but we hope to have it back next week. And our bonus episode for our Patreon is still upcoming when I get the strength. And we had a bit of a heat wave here. I know there's been a huge heat dome over the United States, the central United States, and I think some of it came up and got us. And the other night I was going to bed at midnight and it was 26 degrees with it felt like 37 Celsius, which is pretty close to, the very high 90s if you're listening in America. And that is really unusual for us. Usually if it's 20 at midnight in the summer, it's hot because we're at a 1,800 feet elevation and it gets cool here. The air is usually dry. It was moist as hell. It was a furnace going outside because my family had come home from a bit of a vacation. I was helping them in and it was so hot outside. And I felt like, how would somebody without air conditioning not get heat exhaustion in this? I'm starting to learn more about it because there's so many, I think, upwards of 10,000 people died in the heat waves in Europe in May and June. They're starting to calculate as a whole, which is a lot of people. And as I've always said, if it was an event that killed 10,000 people, like an earthquake, well, we would be remembering it for generations, but this is silently going to go away. No one's going to hardly remember it next year, and it's going to keep happening, and it's going to keep getting worse. And I baby my air conditioner, I don't know how old it is. It was here with the house. It was probably before here. And I'm just making sure it doesn't break because I can't afford to fix it or replace it. So I baby it and I try and keep it, not running for too long at a time. And I do it in increments. But we were comfortable. But I just, my wife works with people who are disadvantaged and in our social work job, and they don't have anything. They don't even have a fan sometimes. Poor people don't always have the luxury of just going out and getting what they need. And it's just awful. And I know this is going to get worse wherever. We're here, everywhere, Europe, United States, everywhere is going to have more heat-related deaths. And I know that from my starting to research this, heat exhaustion turns into heat stroke. And it's like once it gets to heat stroke, it's like 50% of elderly people die from heat stroke. That's a lot. So once you get it, you're practically dead, right? Like it's too late. Like it's the damage is done, and it's a very serious thing. And I think that we're going to have to keep better statistics and actually do something as a society, because regardless of what happens, it's going to keep getting warmer.
Yeah, and a couple of the stories I'm going to talk about this week, they are partly about that issue of all the heat waves that we've been having. All right, but first, from the IEA, they released a new report called Electric Car Trends. This came out about a month ago, and I wanted to talk particularly about one graph that they had, which I thought was super interesting because it covers the period of new car sales from 2020 to 2025. And of course, we started the podcast in 2020, and we remember those days when, there were not a lot of electric cars available. It was, a bit of a difficult thing and an uphill slog. So on the one hand, it's fantastic to see the progress. So many, many countries are listed. All the countries whose EV penetration for new car sales is above 10% is listed on this graph. And there's one dot for 2020 and then another dot for 2025 to see how much it has increased. Now, as you might expect, Norway is the absolute top of the chart. We know that they're at nearly 100% of new car sales being electric. What I didn't quite remember, back in 2020, they were already 75% for new car sales being electric, like essentially ahead of everybody now still. Like their 2020 number is the highest on the graph.
But they had so many incentives and disincentives to do that, right? They were really going stronger than anybody has ever gone, any policy has ever gone. Like you would get free parking, free tolls, and if you drove electric, and then suddenly everybody was driving electric, and then they had to, there was no advantage. They couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of incentives.
It was very strong government policy. They knew that this was the future. They decided to act on it in spite of the fact that Norway is a massive oil producing nation and a lot of their wealth comes from oil. They went hard. So also on the chart here, Nepal, they were down at 10% for new car sales of electric in 2020, and now they're up at 68%. Massive, massive jump in just 5 years in Nepal.
And I think they're still going even stronger than ever. They really want to do that. With the oil shock, they do not want to spend money importing oil.
No, and I would add, for the people in Norway, they're not walking around complaining about how they all have to drive electric cars. They know it's better and they know it's the future. And, they're not arguing that we should go back or some ridiculous thing. Iceland was already at 52% in 2020. I didn't realize
know that.
Yeah. They're 62% now, so just a 10% jump for them. China, as of course we talk about all the time, way down at 6% in 2020.
And I bet a lot of those were tiny little city cars that maybe didn't even go full speed on highways. They were just dinky little things that were kind of a joke at the time. And now they're leading the world's auto industry in auto tech. They are crushing it in a very short amount of time.
They were making electric cars in 2020, but at 6% penetration, it was not a lot. And insane progress to now 53% in 2025. That's a big one. Vietnam, another huge jump from basically 0 to 41% in the last 5 years.
I just want to point out that China has got up to 63% in the last 2-3 months.
Right.
Because of the oil shock, that is helping that. So hopefully that maintains.
Accelerating things. And then, you go down the chart and then you see the absolutely sad progress of Canada from 4% to 11%, which is still pretty low, and the United States from 2% up to 10%. So they have just cracked the 10% barrier in 2025 in the US. And we can feel it here on the podcast. We have lots of optimism for these kinds of transitions. But they're happening in other parts of the world, not so much here in the U.S. and Canada.
That's right. And I don't know. You live here in North America, you wonder, if you're an average person who doesn't listen to our show, which is foolish. I don't know why anyone would not listen to our show. But you would think that electric cars just aren't working, but they are. There's too much of a self-centered look at it. People don't look outside their countries and the United States and Canada very much. Eric sent us an article about his government in California restricting gas boilers and water heaters. And he writes, "It sounds like James's surgery went well. Wishing you a speedy recovery. The attached article represents some slow progress towards decarbonization. The South Coast Air Board earlier backed off restrictions on gas appliances for residences. And I guess we'll take what we can get," he says. Keep up the great work in getting the word out. So what has happened in this article is the United States Appeals Court upheld Southern California restrictions on commercial and industrial gas-powered water heaters and boilers in 4 counties. The rules aim to cut emissions and can prevent 2,800 premature deaths while delivering an estimated $95 billion in health benefits. That's a lot of money in health benefits by switching to electric. It's I wish people would pay more attention to those health benefits because, if you're a billionaire, it doesn't affect you, but it affects a lot of society, a lot of government's expenditures. Business groups argue the regulations violate federal law and raise costs, but the court ruled that the Clean Energy Act allows states to regulate pollution sources. So Yeah, they're trying, but and often winning in court.
Enormous benefits from clean air, which should be obvious, but isn't always. All right, from Renewable Energy Magazine, how to stay cool in a heat wave. And I always love stories like this, and it's obviously relevant in the recent heat waves that we have. And I'm not going to go over everything in the article, but I would encourage you, if you are struggling with a house or an apartment that's too hot, always seek out these kinds of articles. And there's always things you can do to help keep it just a tiny bit cooler with certain practices. And so, yeah, there's a long list of stuff, but the one I'd never heard before, and I thought was interesting enough to bring up: buy a garage door with a high R value. So
and what does that
applies
do?
to, obviously, people. Well, it's just insulating your house. And I don't know anybody that has an insulated garage door. Here in Canada, most new houses in the last 30 years are built usually with an attached garage. Usually there's a driveway and a garage in the front of the house, but I've never seen an insulated garage door. Maybe they exist. Maybe I don't know enough people to sort of check this out. But, you know, the more you can insulate your house, the better it is in the winter and the better it is in the summer. But I just never realized that, you know, garage doors could be part of the solution. Those attached garages are often just, you know, they're not heated as much as the house is, or, you know, cooled as much as the house is. But if it's not insulated, you're going to let tons of heat into your house through that garage door, which, yeah, usually they're just a hunk of metal. So, yeah. So, you know, other things on the list are, you know, obvious energy efficient windows, seal and insulate your attic. That's a big one. Smart thermostats. That's another big one. And then just, you know, blackout curtains during the day to keep the sun out, that sort of thing. Replace your air conditioning filter monthly to keep your system running at peak efficiency. You must have a filter on your air conditioner?
I've got a reusable one that doesn't get dirty, so I hardly ever wash it. Like, I don't know why it doesn't get dirty, but I've been thinking with the wildfire smoke to put in like the best filter I can for the summer, because they last 3 months. As long as you remember to change them. And it's very important because those really good filters will clog up fast with dust and allergens and whatnot. So you have to make it, because if you forget, then you could screw your furnace and cause you some maintenance trouble. But
yeah, and air conditioners, they'll eventually burn out the compressor if it has to struggle too much with something like a, you know, dirty filter.
All right. Well, I have another letter here. It says, "Hi, Brian and James. I thought you would find this interesting. Despite Trump's push for more dirty coal to meet our electricity requirements, solar is still winning." This is from the Associated Press. In May, for the first time, solar supplied more of the United States' electricity than coal, or 12.8%, Ember Research said. Coal supplied 12.2%, its fourth lowest monthly share ever. Solar hits new milestones, even as Trump, you know, he's trying to build new coal plants. Like, it's insane. It's absolutely certifiable. It's certifiably insane.
Yeah.
Because it would cost a fortune and make everybody's electricity bills go up. And then they'll probably blame the Democrats in the next election or something, you know, but it's ridiculous. They'll blame renewables somehow.
Yes, but as always, the fuel costs for solar and wind are zero, and that always wins.
And I believe that was from Deddy and Linda. Okay.
Okay, from Canary Media, home batteries just for air conditioning. So this is a story coming out of the recent heat wave that they had in New York City. There's a new program from Every Electric and Con Edison, the utility that lets New Yorkers power their window AC units with home batteries. So as we know, lots of people in New York City live in these older apartment buildings that are not, you know, properly air conditioned. And so window AC units are hugely, hugely popular in New York City. But, you know, this can be a stress on the grid when you have these massive heat waves that we've been having recently. So ahead of the July 4th weekend, the mayor in New York, Mamdani, he asked residents to set the AC to 78 Fahrenheit or 25.5 Celsius.
That's where mine is.
To reduce strain on the grid.
That's the reduced strain on my air
is,
conditioner, not the grid, but
yeah,
yeah.
but I'm sure that makes a huge difference, even if it's set at 78, right?
Yeah, I would think it would. It's because it's the difference between the outdoor temperature and the indoor temperature. There's probably a mathematical equation that's beyond my pay grade that makes it really hard once you get lower and lower. And of course, the outdoor temperature needs to take the heat away from the fluid that goes outdoors in an air conditioner. But yeah.
Yeah, so this is a pilot project where they're handing out essentially free battery packs. These are sort of the size of like a car battery, or maybe a little bit bigger, like 12-volt car battery, little small suitcase-sized batteries. And they're handing them out. They handed out 1,000 of them for free. You just have to put down a $50 deposit so that they can get them back afterwards. So these things just plug into the wall and then plug into your window AC unit, and they know to charge overnight or when the grid is not being used. And then they know to deploy that energy during the peak of the day when it's the hottest and when the strain on the grid is the most. So the battery can run your air conditioner for about 4 hours. So perfect for, noon to 4 or 2 to 6. And then you don't have the same restriction necessarily. You're running it off a battery. You can say, hey, I don't have to listen to the mayor. I can turn it down lower than 78 if I want to. And, I'm sure there's people that would appreciate that a lot. These are people that can't necessarily afford to do something like this on their own. You live in an apartment, you're a renter, your options are always kind of limited. So 10,000 people have applied for this so far. But, like I said, they've given out 1,000 of them. It says Con Edison is investing $3.9 billion to lay more cables and build new transformers and substations to maintain their service as extreme heat becomes more frequent and more severe. So this is what the grid has to prepare for now, these massive heat waves. And, this is
it's expensive.
piece of the puzzle. I mean,
Climate change is expensive.
but doing nothing is even more expensive, as it'll just make the problem worse. So I think, large grid storage batteries are, the longer term solution and kind of the ultimate solution. But, this is all happening quickly. We need all hands on deck. We need every solution possible. And if they can expand this program, and, those batteries will last for years to come. So this could, help out the grid for quite a long time.
Yeah. I mean, when people come home from work, there's also a spike from people turning on the air conditioners or turning down the air conditioners. So that's something you have to pay a lot of money to meet those demands. And I don't know, batteries are just getting so cheap, and the trajectory and technology on them is to keep getting cheaper and cheaper. So at some point, it might be easier to just give everybody a battery than to put an underground cable in, and do all this billions of dollars of work. There's going to be an economic equation, of course. But like you said, the grid batteries are, when you do things big, it's cheaper per unit of whatever you're doing. Just like solar is cheaper on a mass scale than it is on putting on everyone's roof. But still,
but it might be quicker to do this because, grid connections for large battery projects, these can take, several years to get going.
Having a good solar policy too, to put it on apartment buildings, even though it's not going to power the whole building, it still cuts down the use of the electricity on that building, especially during heat waves, because that's the time of the day when the sun is shining.
Balcony solar that works in a similar way is starting to be deployed in various U.S. states.
Well, if you'd like to contact us like our previous writers have done, we hope and welcome that you would do such a thing. If you want to take the time, please drop us an email at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. That's cleanenergyshow, all one word, @gmail.com. And of course, there's that voicemail option at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow.
All right, moving to the UK. The UK plans to deliver a plan to replace the road tax on gasoline. So this is a topic that comes up every once in a while. We love to complain around here or in Saskatchewan where we live because they slapped a $300 EV fee for electric vehicles in the province. A very punitive tax. The idea being that when you buy gasoline, a certain percentage of that goes to infrastructure like the roads. So if you're not paying for gasoline, then you're not necessarily paying your share of the tax, but I believe the fee we pay is way more than anyone pays in their gasoline tax, depending on how much you drive. So they've come up with a plan for this in the UK. It won't take effect until 2028, but they're planning it as a way to replace that existing road tax that comes from gasoline sales. And of course, under the old system, the more you drive, the more gas you buy, the more you pay in taxes. So they're trying to work out an EV version of this, and it's going to be based on essentially your odometer. It's going to be checked in different ways. Certain vehicles need to get a safety check every year. So if that's the case, then they'll just read your odometer at the same time. They said that there's a plan for fleets because this could be an onerous problem for companies that have hundreds of vehicles. So they've worked out a system where there's a little bit of estimation involved, and it's maybe not so necessarily precise, but that will make it simpler to implement. The scheme will be 3 pence per mile for an electric vehicle and 1.5 pence per mile for a plug-in hybrid. And so the more you drive, the more you use the roads, the more tax that you will pay.
Why is it more for an EV than a plug-in hybrid? Why is it more for an EV than a plug-in hybrid?
Because presumably you're still buying gasoline with the plug-in hybrid.
And paying the tax that way. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
So they're keeping the tax on gasoline as normal.
Yeah. And they made sure to point out that they still have some favorable tax treatment for EVs. They don't want to discourage the use of EVs. So petrol and diesel vehicles will end up paying more in other sort of fees and taxes. And yeah, it's not until 2028, but that's the kind of runway that you need for a big scheme like that.
Right. Well, I would be scared if I was a gig worker, or an Uber driver or something like that. That's a lot of miles are going to add up and be a tax that maybe you're not paying right now. But they have a couple of years to prepare for it. The Clean Energy Show is now concluding. It's a shorter summer version of our show, and one done by Brian Stockton. Thank you, Brian, for taking the reins of this week's show and then doing it while I'm really not able to. The Clean Energy Show is an independent podcast powered by listeners like you guys who support us on Patreon. We would not be here without our Patreon supporters. Thank you to all of you. You can do so for as little as $1 a month, and you'll get ad-free episodes, early access before anyone else, exclusive behind-the-scenes content, discounts on merch, all kinds of fun things, and you'll be a part of our community. And you can find us on social media apps like TikTok, Instagram, and Blue Sky as Clean Energy Pod. And anytime you want to email us, please go ahead. Thank you to our Patreon Clean Club executive members, Brett Rutley, Tiernan, and Green Bastard. And they get a shout out every month for giving us lots of support. We'll see you again in 7 days when we will return to the lightning round.
See you next week.